Hello, everybody. So my name is Louis Marcoux, and for the next hour, I'll be talking about the 3ds Max Entertainment Creation Suite and how you can use all the tools in the suite to solve different problems or solve different challenges, I would say, in 3D. And I'm going to use 4 different projects from a company called Royale. They're based in LA, and you'll see that it brings us all sorts of challenges, and we're going to use the different tools in the suite to solve all of these 3D challenges. So I'm going to start with the first one here called Vitamin Water.
You never feel happy.
So as you can see, bottles dancing all around, and it is this kaleidoscope effect. So I'm going to start with the product itself. And as you can see, I've got one of those bottles here. And I've painted a bit of marks on there, and I made it flat white. The idea is that I wanted to reality capture it with one of our new tools that we've made available for the iPad and the iPhone. So I'm going to jump to my iPad now. And we've done a few applications for the iPad and the iPhone, like I said. And you can go and download them and install them. If you have your iPhone, what I'm showing you now on the iPad can be done as well. So I'm going to start 123D Catch. And in 123D Catch, what you do is you just go into New Capture. And it's going to bring up the camera for the device. And I can go in here, and I can say, you know, I want to take a picture. I don't want to get you nauseous, so I'm just going to say, take a picture. And I go around like this and take a picture and take a picture. And you can take many pictures like this around your object. And what you do is that you send it to the cloud. The cloud processes it for you and sends you back a 3D model. So just to give you an idea of how it looks like when you're done. Oops, it's upside down. It's a full 3D model. It's fully textured, and you can orbit around. And I've got this mode here called the gyro mode, and I can go around like this, and I can look at my object. And for me, I'm looking at my device. It really feels like I'm looking at this 3D object in 3D space. So once you've got this done, you want to send it to your PC. You want to be able to edit it and refine it a bit further. So you have an option here that says email capture. Send it as an email. It sends you a 3DP file, and you can open it on 123D Catch on your PC. So I'm going to jump on the PC now. I'm going to exit this. And I'm going to open up 123D Catch. It's the PC version. And you can see that all of the pictures that I've taken are listed here. So I can go from one picture to the other. And if I click on one of those pictures, I can immediately go into orbiting mode. And I can see how good this model is. And I can zoom in and see that we see all of the details of the writing there. But it's a fully textured model that can immediately bring in any of our applications. The way that it's done from here, and you can see that I've placed an axis system in there. I've defined where the X, the Y, the Z. I also defined the scale. That's what you do in 123D Catch. Once it's done, you can go here and File, Export Capture As. You can export as a DWG, as an OBJ. But in our case here, we can export as an FBX file. It's going to embed all of the texture, all of the model, and I can bring that into 3ds Max right away. So what I'll do is I'll jump into Max, and I go here and say File, Import. And this is the FBX file that I've exported. It's called Vitamin Water Demo. And I'm going to add that to my scene. And immediately, you'll have your full texture model. And you also have all the cameras that were used, or that the point of view of the cameras that were used when we shot when we shot from the iPad. So I want to clean this up. And to clean this up, I'm going to start by just selecting the bottle, inverting my selection, delete all the cameras. I don't need them in what I want to build here. And my goal in 3ds Max is to build that dance of bottles starting from this reality capture model. I want to start with this reality capture model, and then we're going to refine that model, make it more production ready, but we're going to start with that reality capture. If I want to edit this a bit further, I'm going to convert that to an editable poly so that I can have access to all of the editable poly tools. And I can go around and just say, I'm going to grab a few faces at the top. I want to isolate the bottle itself and remove everything that I don't need. So I'm going to grow that selection here until I get to the table, maybe shrink it a little bit, Control-I, delete, and now I've got my bottle isolated and removed from its environment. I can scale it down to move it to the scale of the scene here. But I've already pre-scaled and placed at the center of the universe. So I can go at the center here, and my bottle is ready to be used. So that's how it looks like when you clean it. The problem is, not the problem, but the challenge now is that I've got my markings that I've used for reality capture. Those markings will give you really good reality capture result because it understands the 3D space. But when comes the time to render this or to use it in our scene, we want to clean it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Viewport Canvas inside of 3ds Max. And Viewport Canvas is a 3D layer-based paint system that has all of the kind of the basic tools of painting right in the viewport. So I'm going to select this object. I'm going to use the clone tool. And I'm going to go into the diffuse color. That's the only map that we've got on there. And now I've got a layer. It's only my basic layer. I'm going to add a new layer. So all the modification will be separated from my background or my original image. Then I can go into my paint behavior. I want to clone from all the layers. I can even go and clone from screen if I want to. I can use any sources to cloning. So I'm going to go and grab an area that is clean and just paint it back here. And in 3D space, I can clean my model like so, and make it look the way that I want for the end. So if I do all of this, because we brought in a JPEG file and now we created layers, when I exit my tool, it's going to say, hey, you know, you've created layers. I don't want to lose the layers that I've done. I want to keep them separated. So I'm going to say save as PSD and replace the textures and material. I'm just going to override this PSD file. Oops. Override this PSD file, save that. Yes, I want to replace it. And now what I've done is I've saved all my layers, and I can go back to them, and I can add on to that. And I can also go in Photoshop and edit them, and all the layers will be preserved, which is a great workflow as well if you're working with Photoshop as well for texturing. So just to show you the fully clean texture, that's how it looks like. I've cleaned everything on my bottle here, and I could refine it even better, remove some shadows, or add some extra elements there. But I'm happy with what I've got there. I want to start to make those bottle dance on the screen. And to make those bottle dance, I wanted to create something that is procedural and in which I could create different variations and then render them on top of each other and create different kaleidoscope effects. But my goal is to explore some dance ideas with this setup. So it's a very simple setup. It looks like a very simple setup, but it's just this rotating geometry there, and I'm just going to select it to show you. What I'm really interested in here is the vertex position of all these corners there. Because I'm going to use those vertices or those vertices position to create particles and emit particles from those vertices. And you see that I've got a modifier stack in which I've got a taper, so it can change the taper here. I can change the twist of this. I can change the bend, and by mixing all of these sliders and playing with these sliders, I'll be able to create all sorts of shapes and dancing shapes. But right now, the bottles are still not emitted from this. It's a particle flow system. So when I bring up particle flow, I'm going to enable those two events. I've got the event for the right and the event for the left. And if I take a look at what we have is, I've got a shape instance, and that shape instance is pointing to my bottle. I'm emitting on the object, and I've created an object for the left and an object for the right. And it's emitting on all of the vertices. So every vertex will receive a bottle. And I'm emitting from frame 1 to frame 43, and I'm emitting 42 bottles, which means that at every frame, one new bottle will be added onto the vertices. And I've also added a spin here, and the spin has a rate. Right now, it has a rate of 0. But what I'm going to end up having is these bottles appearing onto my system. But I want to start to explore ideas and movements and all of that. So what I'll do is I'll just go into my camera view, my good camera perspective here. I'm going to isolate the actual bottle or the particle system, and I can start to play this like so. But now what I want to do is I want to change in the modifier stack. I want to change this particle flow. I want to change some settings. And in order to do that interactively, what I did is I did a parameter collection, where I've captured all of the parameters, all of the modifier sliders that I want to be editing in real time. So I'm going to press play here, and I'm going to start to play with those values here. So let's say I have a spin of 200. What do I get? Oh, I get those bottle turning around. I can say, well, I want to try with 300. What I get, maybe 800. It goes super fast, maybe 100. I can start different spin rate and get some ideas of how this could dance. I can make them a bit more space. I can go and try different space and different spacing and things like that. I can start to play with the bending, the taper to separate them a little bit more, maybe add a bit more spacing like that. And you can start to explore different dances and things like that. And your goal here is to interactively try things and get results. And by mixing all of those different tries, you're going to get different results that you can combine together and in compositing in the end. So if I just go back here to my main view, I've created a few of those particle systems exactly with the same technique. I've got a tube here that does exactly the same thing. I got a box that starts twisting. I also have a tube that spin here. And if I combine all of these together, you get different type of shapes and result, and you can get this stance of the bottle. But right now what we're doing, what we're rendering here, is the actual bottle that we've reality captured. And for the final production, that might not be as clean as we want it to be, especially if those bottles comes very close to the camera. So I want to have a better resolution bottle. So in order to do that, I'm just going to isolate the bottle for a second. And we're going to go close to it, something like this. And I'm going to close this down. And what I want to do now is I want to start building a new geometry that's going to be a bit more clean, and on which I'm going to have more control about over the material that I'm going to put on it. So I'm going to create a new empty object. It's just an empty editable poly. And I'm going to use the step build. And I want to start building on a surface. And I'm going to pick that bottle to be my construction surface. I'm going to give a little bit of offset, which is not something that you would typically do. But I'm doing the offset here so that we can see what I'm going to do on the model. Traditionally, you would not put any offset, but sometimes you lose the model inside there. So what I'll do there is I'm just going to start placing vertices where I want them to be, something like that. And then if I use the Shift key, it's going to recognize where they are quads, and it's going to immediately start to draw polygons. So I can go here and construct the bottle this way. Another way of building this model is using the Topology Tool. It allows you to draw lines. Of course, if you do it with a pen, it's a bit more straight. But it's kind of the same idea, is that everywhere where it crosses where a line creates a quad, it will create the quad this way. So that's how you would rebuild the topology for this geometry using your reality capture model. So this is my final topology. You see, it's very clean. It's very well laid out. I've used different techniques to place them around the geometry, but the model fits exactly what I did in reality capture. And because now I've got faces that I can easily isolate, I can now change the materials and create multiple materials to make it look a bit more realistic. So this is what I've done here for the material. The material is set in 3 parts. We've got a material for the sticker, a material for the cap, and a material for the bottle glass. You see that it's an Arch and Design material. It's an Arch and Design material. They look realistic right away, so I don't have to worry too much about all of the settings. It will look right, it will look realistic, and it will look great for my bottles. So for the bottle color, I'm using the reflection and the refraction to get the liquid look. And I'm using a multi-submap. And the multi-submap creates one instance of a color or a map based on random. So it randomizes all of these colors here. If I want the map number 1 to be a bit more saturated, I can just make the red a bit more saturated this way. But it's going to randomize all of my objects. So every instance of this material on a specific object will have its own color set. So that's going to be the color for the water. And for the sticker, I'm using a composite material, and the base is using the same type of color. And on top of that base color, what I'll do is I'll put a new map, and I'm using a new feature of Max 2014, which is the vector map. And a vector map allows me to load any type of vector file, and especially if I've got an AI file coming from Illustrator, I can load it as a vector. So if I'm going to go here and say load my vector file, I've got an AI file here, but you can also load PDF file with multiple pages, so you can animate between one page and the other. We can load an AI file, and the beauty of this is that it loads the AI file as a vector map and not as a bitmap, which means that you can go in and zoom in on it infinitely. It's always going to look sharp. So now that we've got this, I'm going to also enable the alpha channel. And if I look at the image that I've got for this, we see that this is the alpha, and this is the RGB component. This is the sticker for the bottle, and I want to put that onto the bottle itself. So it's going to be on the composite map. It's going to be the top one here. And if I double-click on to maximize this, you'll see that no matter how close you're going to get from this, is that because it's a vector, it's always going to look sharp. And those colors will be randomized. So all of my particles that receive this specific material will all have a different color, but it's going to match, the sticker is going to match the color of the liquid that that's inside. So now that we've done we've replaced our object, we want to bring it into our particle system, which is quite easy. Bring up the particle flow system. All of the shape instance in all of my operator, they're all instances of each other. So I can go back here and say, grab that bottle here, use that one instead. And now what I've got is a particle flow system. Just going to exit the isolation of the bottle so we can see this. But you'll see that now if I press play, my new bottle is being brought in. It's a bit more clean. It's a bit more sharp. And the material is being instanced on all of these bottles. And every bottle will receive its own color. Which means that now, if I go into my final setup here, go back to the camera here, and press play until I find a frame that is interesting, something like here. If I render this, you'll see, I'm not going to render the whole thing, but you'll see that all of the bottles now, all of the particles that are inside of the system are using a different color, and the color of the sticker match the color of the bottle, and I can randomize all of this and make some changes very quickly to the entire system. So that's how this was built, and if I take a look at the one of the final frame, I've got this here so that you can see how it looks like when rendered. View image file, and I've got this one here. So this is pretty much how it looks. If you look at bottles that are a bit closer to the camera, you see that because it's a vector map, it's very sharp. We've got those randomized color, and we have all these bottles dancing with different dances and all of that. Combined together, it gives you the final result for the vitamin bottle water. The second project I'm going to look at is called MTV at the Movies. I'm going to let it play for a second. So the MTV at the Movies challenge was as you can see, it's a factory in which there are all sorts of creatures, all sorts of monsters being created and being moved around in the environment. And that's kind of what I want to do here. Is I've got the environment that in 3ds Max, I would like to populate it with all sorts of creatures. Of course, creature design can be done in Max and Maya, Softimage, and Mudbox. You can do all of this in any other application. But I want to go back to my iPad for a second, and I'm going to show you a new tool that we've made accessible to the public. There's one here called 123D Sculpt on the top right, and one of them is called 123D Creator. And if you go in the community, you'll see a lot of examples of what can be done with 123D Creator. But it's an application that can run on the iPad, on the newest iPad, I would say. And then you can start with a creature workflow. And the workflow is quite interesting because you start with a basic skeleton, and then you can start to move these joints around and say, well, I want to do a four-legged creature with kind of a crab. Oops, I'm going to do this crab-like. How do you call that? Clamps at the front. So that's kind of what I want to do. And what I'll do here is I'll go into, I'm in move mode now. So if I want to do this, I'm going to go in create mode. I'm going to start to create more joints. So if I want to do some claws here in the front, I'm going to draw more joints, something like this. Maybe a bit more here. I want to shape the head so that we have a head that's a bit longer, maybe lower like this. I want to create some eyeballs over there. It's symmetrical. View is always on by default. I can start to create the legs, go back in here. I want to create, so you can basically create the structure of the creature that you want to build. Once you've got your basic lineup for your structure or for your creature, you can go and scale all of these areas and bulge certain areas that you want to have a bigger, and you can basically bulge or shrink any of those areas. Once you're done with this, I've done it. I'm just going to go and back into my project here and show you the. Go to my project. Here we go. And this is this is what I wanted to build. So I'm just going to open it up in 3D. This is the structure that I've got. And once you're done with the structure, you want to start to sculpt smaller details and add more life into it. So if you want to do this, I'm going to click on the bottom button at the bottom right. And what it's doing now, it's doing all these things, spraying biogel. It's kind of a metaphoric way of saying it's going to subdivide this. It's going to give you the polygon count. It's going to also create a topology that you can go and edit and refine interactively. So if you're familiar with Mudbox, it's a very small subset of the tools that you would find in Mudbox, but it still allows you to be in a coffee shop anywhere and start drawing on your creature and do some sculpting and some painting. So I'm going to go in sculpting mode here. And I'm going a bit closer to the paws there. I'm going to reduce the size of the brush. I'm going a bit closer like this, and I can start to sculpt out and refine my model like this. Of course, I'm not going to build a full monster in front of you like in 5 minutes like this, but you can see that I can sculpt in, sculpt out. I can smooth out some of these areas here. I can sharpen, I can flatten, I can grab areas and move them up and down. So you can really start sculpting your model this way. Also, I can go in and start painting with colors. I can pick a color like this and start painting with my color. I can use a brush and make some changes and things like that. And you can create the creatures this way. The other thing that you can do is you can also paint with an image. That's an image of me, as you can see. So if you don't know what I look like, that's how I look like. I can go and paint this onto my model, and I can also go into camera view and paint some and take some pictures of a texture of someone. Someone sitting in the front row, for example. No, I would not do that. And then you can start painting onto the model. And if I turn off symmetry here, I can say, well, this is me here, and I'm just going to paint my face onto this monster. And this is kind of the idea. If I turn off image paint, you see that now my face is on the monster. Of course, if you take the time to do this correctly, I'm just going to go here and say, open my final there. Oops. I want to go to my projects without saving. And this is the final monster that I've built that I want to bring it into our environment here. So this is kind of a stylish crab, 4-leg, eyes, fashionable character. I don't know exactly, but this is all done in 123D Creature. And I'm ready to bring it into production, so I want to send it to the PC. In order to do that, there's an option here called Export Mesh. And you can go and say, email this file. And what it's going to do is going to email an OBJ file that it's going to open up directly inside of 3ds Max. I'm going to jump back to 3ds Max here. And I'm going to go in in Import. And I'm going to go into my folder where I've placed this. Like I said, it's an OBJ file, so I'm going to click on it, import it, and it's going to be loaded immediately into the environment. So this is how it looks like when brought in. It's very triangulated, but we're going to fix that in Mudbox. Right now, it's kind of rotated in the wrong way, so I'm going to use the Transform Toolbox to rotate it the right way. I'm also going to center the pivot point, place it at the center of the model, minimize it in Z, and then bring this at the center of the universe at 0, 0, 0. And it's a bit small for my scene here, so I'm going to scale it up a bit more, something like that. And it's going to fit more with the scale of the rest of my scene. It's a bit too big, something like this. And I'm going to reset my transformation. I'm done with this. And this is how I brought all of the models that were on the community. Oops, that's not what I want. I want to show you the others. Here we go. So all of those models I got them from the community. You can download them from the community, and people share models there, so you can bring them onto your iPad and play with them, refine them, and all of that. So, and this is my case here. I just brought them in just to test the workflow. But I've got this creature now, and it's great. It looks great. It's all triangulated. The only challenge that I've got now is if I want to animate this with all those triangles, I'm not going to get really good deformation. So I want to transfer this, or I want to retopologize this so that it's all quad-based, but also I want to define where I want to have my subdivisions so that I can have very clear loops around the different joints of my model. So what I'll do is I'll go here and say send to Mudbox, and I'll just add it to the current scene. And then it's going to send it to Mudbox. It's going to load it in. It's going to give me some errors, and that's fine. That's exactly the point. We need to retopologize this so that it's a bit cleaner. So I'm going to say keep this mesh. And it's going to tell me where there are some errors. But right now, I don't really care. I want to fix that with retopology. So I'm going to turn off mesh error display. So again, I don't know if you see it on the projector there. Yeah, but you see that it's still triangulated. But I want to change that into quads. The workflow in Mudbox for topology is really good, is really great, because it allows you to go and create curves on your model and define where you want your joints to be. So if I go in here and I say, well, I want to have this model, I'm just going to look through the perspective here, look through the perspective, go in front view. If I want to have a perfectly symmetrical model, I would like to have a loop that's going to go right in the middle there. So I'm going to create a curve loop, go from top there, and just draw a line down, and you'll see that it's going to draw a line on the model, and it's defining a loop that's going to be rigidly placed onto the model as I retopologize it. Then I can go into the joints there, where I want to have a joint over there, I want to have a joint loop over there. Same thing here. Maybe I want to have a top one there, so I'm just going to create a loop over here. And that's how you define the basic loops for your character. When you're ready to retopologize, of course, I would do a lot more than this, but just as an example here, I'm going to keep it this way. I'm going to go here and say retopologize and create a new operation. When you create a new operation, there's a few settings that you can play with. For example, I can go here and say, I want my target face count to be of a certain amount. So this is going to look at the base model, or the lowest resolution model, and it's going to try to reach that target face count. So for this model, I'll say 6,000 is a good amount of polygons, but it will always subdivide the geometry enough. It's going to create all the subdivision levels to keep all of the details that we're painting on this model. You see that here we are using the curves to control the topology. All of the curves now are set to orange. So I can right-click here and say I don't want them to be soft constraint. I want them to be hard constraint. And an hard constraint means that I'm just going to try to click right on it. I'm going to go, whoops. So I'm going to make all hard constraint. And now that we have all hard constraints, I can start to define soft constraints. If I go and create curve, I can say, well, I want to create a curve here to define kind of the flow of where I want these the polygons to go. And then I can right-click here and say, I want that curve to be a. Going to go here and say, come on. Oh, that curve is not on the model, so that's fine. Anyway, so we can define the orange here to be a soft constraint. And when you're ready to go, you just say retopologize, and it's going to start. And yes, I want to ignore errors. And it's going to start to retopologize based on the indications that I've given it. So I'm going to escape this for now because it takes about 2 minutes to do, and on stage it's a bit long. So I'm just, yes, that's fine. I've canceled this. I'm going to turn this off here. And I'm going to leave that curve there and show you the final model. So as you can see, it's all quadrified. But also, this is my lower resolution mesh. If I go page up, page up, page up, page up, when it does retopologize, it also creates all of the subdivision levels so that I can keep all of the details and continue to paint and sculpt with all of these details. I can also use these details to create the normal maps and the displacement map to go back at the base level. So if I say I want to export level 1, I'm just going to grab this final result here, and I'll say File, Send to 3ds Max, and I'll just say, oops, send to 3ds Max, add selected to current scene. So it's going to, and yes, I want to send at the current level. So I'm going to be able to compare the two. And if I just move it aside, this is my quad version, this is my tri version, and you can see that this is going to be much more suitable for animation. So just to give you an idea, I've done the whole model. I'm going to show you the final. I've added a bit of details here, and I also use Mudbox to add a bit of details in there, and some displacement, and some normal maps, and some ambient occlusion maps. All of this can be done in Mudbox as well. That's my final model. I'm ready to start animating. And my goal here is where we had our creator designer doing the design on the iPad, sending it to us. And now what we're going to do is we're going to animate it, and we're going to send it back to our designer for approval so that he or she can say, well, I like the way it walks, or I like the way it behaves, and all of that. So my goal here is to animate this. In Max, we have a great system for creating quick rigs for creators like this, and it's called CAT, Character Animation Toolkit. So a cat comes in here. If I go into my helpers, I'm going to create a cat parent, and the cat parent is just the base for my model. I'm just going to place it at the center of the universe so that it's right there at 0, 0, 0. And now I can start to build the rig with pieces of puzzle, I would say, or puzzle pieces that I can start to assemble together to create a rig. So I've got 4 legs, I've got 2 arms, and I've got a kind of a neck and a head. So to start with, I will start with the pelvis. I'm going to grab that pelvis and bring it kind of the center of my model. And then I can go in and start to add legs, add arms, add spine, and all of this will allow me to assemble my creature. It's going to work a bit better if I just isolate this model and make it see-through. So we're going to build our rig this way. But I can go here and say I want to add a leg, and the leg is full IK, FK, which means that it's going to be fully animatable right away. I'm going to place the joints there where they should be in the model. And can't always assume that you're working on symmetrical model, but you can refine one side or the other separately if you want to. But if I add a new leg now, it's going to immediately create a leg on the other side that matches the first one. I can add another leg, and this one I'm going to use it for the front leg like this. I'm going to bring the platform there. I'm going to move the knee there and maybe move the joint here to the front. And again, if I grab the pelvis and add a new leg, it automatically matches the first leg. And then you can go on like this. I'm going to create a spine. That spine will be the base for my rib cage here. And then from there, I can create another spine that's going to be the base for the head and the neck. And then I can grab this here and say I want to add an arm, and that arm will be the base for the claws there. And I can grab this here and place it like so, and just kind of match the whole skeleton of my creature. Then I can go here and say add another arm, and you can see that it's going to match it immediately. So that's kind of how you build a rig with CAT. And this is my final CAT rig for this character. And because we've created with legs and arms, it already knows how to animate this in a procedural way, which means that I can go into my motion panel here, and I can say, bring in a cat motion, and if I press play, my character is already walking. It has an attitude, it has a speed of walking, and I can go and adjust that and make it look and change the attitude of the character. So now it walks a little bit too fast. I'm going to reduce the strength of the stride length to a bit more of a contained value. And I'm going to reduce the speed of the walk cycle so it walks a bit slower. But you can see that now it's walking on spot, and it's a great way to edit this walk cycle. So we're looking always at the character. But if we want to see how it looks as it walks online, I can just press play here. And you see that depending on the speed that I've created, it's going to walk online. And what I can do as well is I can go here and say, I want to follow a specific object in the scene. So I'm going to say, follow this path node. It's going to immediately jump into that position. And now if I press play, you'll see that our character is not only going to follow the position, but as this object rotates, it's going to start to walk sideways, and I can make it walk backways and all of that. It's always going to solve to have this character walk into that spot. So when I'm happy with this, I would like to have the approval of my creature designer. So what I'd like to do is send it back to him or her. So I'll just select all of the objects that I want to export as an FBX. They're all selected. Go here, export, and export selected. I'm just going to override my four-legged demo there. Yes, I want to override that. And a new application that we've made available on the application exchange store, and yes, when it has to resample the cat animation, it does tell you a warning. But if you go in help here and you go into the product information, there's a thing here called exchange apps, and it allows you to buy or download free applications. And one of them that is free now, it's called FBX Review. And FBX Review, you can load in any FBX file, fully textured, fully animated, and it's free. So it's a great review tool in a production. So I'll go here and say open. I'm going to open up my four-leg demo. And you can see now that it's going to load up the objects that I exported, and I can play the animation, and I can look at my character, orbit around. It's fully interactive. I've got different display mode. If I want to see the wireframe, I can set up the wireframe and look at it. But immediately, without having to pay one dime, my creature supervisor can look at the creature, how it walks, and make some changes and make some recommendation. Also, because there's a timeline here, I can just go and scrub the timeline and say, well, this area here worked well, and there may be some sliding there that we want to adjust. So all of this can be done from FBX Review, which again is free on the Exchange app store. So that's the workflow from going from 1 to 3D creature to a fully animated character that we can bring it into production. So now I'm going to jump into another spot. It's called The Roast of Charlie Sheen, and it's an introduction for the show on Comedy Central. All right, so another great piece from Royale, and I want to thank them again for letting us use their material for this demonstration. And this was a challenging project. First of all, you had to populate, the idea was to populate the mind of Charlie Sheen, which is in itself is a challenging idea. And the other thing is that they had a very quick turnaround. They had to deliver fast, and they had to populate the environment with all sorts of things that would make this interesting. So this is one of the shots from the clip there, and what we want to do there is we want to have Charlie Sheen dressed up as a knight and waving at the passing wagon as it's going by. So we want to bring in Charlie Sheen in there. So what I'll do here is I'll just jump and isolate this area, and we're going to focus on that area here. And before I bring in Charlie Sheen, I want to show you one of the new features that we've added in the 3ds Max extension for 2014, and it's the support for point cloud data. So let's say that I want to bring a point cloud, a scan that was done somewhere else, and I want to bring it inside of 3ds Max. So now what we can do is we can go into the primitives. There's a point cloud object primitive. If I go in point cloud, I can pick a point cloud file. And just in this case here, I've got a skull. It's an RCS file. It's a scan outline of a skull. I'm going to bring that in, and using AutoGrid, I'm going to define where I want that to be. So I'm just going to place it at the top there, and it's going to load in all of the points. But not only it's going to load the points, but it's going to allow me to manage some of them. So right now we are looking at 1.9 million points out of 4.7 million points of this skull. I can decide that I want to have a better performance. I'm going to reduce the number of points on this model. And also, I can define the size of the display. So if I make it very big, you'll see that all of these are just points, and they're displayed here in the viewports. If I just reduce the point there, you see that they're very, very small. But if I make it a bit bigger, it's almost going to look solid right there in the viewport. But you see that, again, there's some artifacts around it. So I can open up the limit box, and I can start to edit that limit box and reduce it and make it fit within that area here. So that's kind of how you would clean up a point cloud model. You would reduce the cage until you have your skull completely isolated. You can also use display volumes. You can create spheres or geometries that will isolate this area for the point cloud. So that's one of the things that you can do now in Max 2014 in the extension release. So I'm not going to really bother about that. Just wanted to mention it. I really care now about bringing Sheen here into our environment. And this is the character. He's dressed up as a knight, supposed to be Sheen. And what we want to do is we want to have him wave at the crowd. So I can start animating and keyframing, but I want to explore a few other ideas that makes the animation process very simple and easy and quick inside of the 3ds Max Entertainment Creation Suite. So first, I'll isolate all of the objects or all of the components of this rig that are skinned to the character. And now we are looking at the basic character. I can start with the animation store. The animation store is something we've added in Max one version ago, and it's a web-based animation resources done by Mixamo, and it's all motion capture data that I can browse and I can bring onto my character. But the way that it's done in Max is that it's fully integrated, and you can preview animations onto all of your characters before you buy anything. So what I'll do here is I'll just go and say search motion. It's going to bring up the animation store. This animation store is being updated by Mixamo on a weekly basis, so you can see more and more animations in there. You have different categories, and you can go here and say search. So I'm going to search for a wave animation. Say wave, search. It's going to look for a wave animation. It's going to show me a few of those. I'll click on one of them, and you see that as I'm clicking, I didn't spend the $10.50 yet, but I can preview this on my actual model. Because it's a bipedal character, cat base or biped base, the animation store already recognizes what it is, and it puts the animation on the character, and I can preview it right away. I can go here and say I want to look at some of the free animations that are in there. I can say search. It's going to list all of the free samples that I've got there, and one of the one that I like here is the Gangnam style animation. So I can have Sheen, dance on the Gangnam style animation like so. So you can start trying different things like that. It's one way of quickly generating animation inside of 3ds Max using the animation store. So I'm going to turn off the animation store. Another way to use animation and characters in animation is to use Motion Builder for either using motion capture or to bring animation from different sources. So I'll go here and say send to Motion Builder, and I'll say add to current scene. And it's going to load this scene inside of Motion Builder. Right now, it loads it in a 3ds Max camera. So I'm going to just delete that camera. I don't need it. So just say here, delete. And it's going to go back in perspective view here. And we have our character. Because it's a bipedal character and it has been done in CAT, I don't have to go through the process of characterizing and make Motion Builder understand what the bones really mean. What I can do right away is just go and assign a control rig, and the control rig is a full IK-FK rig. And what it means is that if I grab one of the joints there, the rig inside of Motion Builder, if I grab one of the hand, you see that the whole body will follow. It would always try to make the whole body follow the joint that you're trying to move in place. So thank you. So it's very quick to pose your character. What you can also do in Motion Builder, which is really nice, is that you can. There's a gentleman here actually in Amsterdam called Jasper, and Jasper has a website called Brekel.com. It's BREKEL.com, and he has built a free device for the Kinect. So you can install a Kinect on your computer, and you can move in front of your computer and have your character move in real time in front of you and do some posing and some animation. There's also a pro version that that you can have for this type of setup, but you can just plug in your Kinect and go and animate with Motion Builder. Of course, you can go with higher end motion capture devices as well. But what I've got here is I've got a few animations. I've got a punch animation, which is in the tutorials for Motion Builder. And when you bring in an animation system like this or a rig, you see that this character is very, very, very small compared to the other one. And this is the animation for it. Motion capture file. And it's a different skeleton structure. But still, because it's all done in Motion Builder and it's brought in as a character, Motion Builder knows how to retarget this animation onto my main character. So I'll say I want my punch guy to be driving my Charlie Sheen character. And immediately, you have our Charlie Sheen character being driven by the punch guy animation. So the final animation for this is just a wave. So we have an animation like this. It's called Simple Wave, very slow. And that's kind of what I want. So I'm going to bring in the take here. I'm going to merge it into my file. And it's applied on a character called the Gremlin, which is, doesn't really matter. But this is the animation that I want to bring in inside of 3ds Max. So once you're happy with what you see inside of Motion Builder and onto your rig, you can see that you're connected to 3ds Max. I'll say update, and it's going to update 3ds Max, and it's going to bring in everything inside of 3ds Max. But Motion Builder had this animation at frame 0. So we have our animation here at frame 0. But my clip sequence happens at frame 214. So my real animation sequence should be at frame 214 here. And it goes up to frame 283. And I know that because I've prepared this presentation, so I know those frames by heart. This is where I want this animation to be. But you see that 214 here is kind of empty because this animation happened at frame 0. But in CAT, you can quickly go into your layer system and go into this track view editor and quickly see all of your tracks for your. So I've got take 2 that was brought in from Motion Builder. I'll say I want that to be at frame 214. I'm going to zoom in to make sure that it starts at 214 here, something like that. And now my animation is fully starting at the frame that I want to. So it's a great way to move layers in time. And if you've got multiple layers, you can adjust them and place them in time where you want them to be. So the last thing we want to do is to play with the cloth. So the cloth here, the way that I've set it up is we're using the mCloth simulation tool. So it's the real-time Mass Effect cloth system. And for the cape here, I've used the mCloth system. It's using the wind in the front there. And also, if I look at the vertices, we'll see that the vertices have been set up so that the ones at the top there are following the rib cage, so they're not going to be simulated as cloth, but we have a soft selection that drives into the full simulation. Everything that is blue is going to be fully simulated as a Mass Effect simulation. So if I want to see this, bring up the Mass Effects toolbar, do a live simulation to see how it looks like in the viewport. And once I'm happy, I know that it works fine, I'm ready to bake this and make it part of my scene. So when I'm happy, I just go here and say Bake Selected. It's going to bake the cloth animation onto the cape here. It's going to bake actually the whole system. I'm also simulating the cloth for the robe here, simulating everything based on the animation that I brought back from Motion Builder. When it's done, I don't need those simulation tools anymore. Everything has been cached, and I can play this back onto the character. So if I bring back everything, show it all, and I can go back to my camera view here. We have our final animation with our character moving in like so and waving at the passing wagon. The only thing, the last thing I want to talk about into this is that we also just announced a partnership with AMD where we developed a stereo cam viewer inside of 3ds Max. It's going to be available for you again on the Exchange store at the end of the month. And I want to show you the workflow. It's quite easy. The idea is that you've got a camera in your scene. It's not a stereoscopic camera, so you want to transform this into a stereoscopic camera. You go into your system, add a stereo. You say, I want to pick a camera. This camera already exists in my scene. It's already animated. And now we have our stereo rig has been done. So I can go back to my camera view here, show everything back onto the frame. And instead of looking at camera 2, I'm going to go into my stereo cameras and bring up this camera. Right now, we're looking at the central eye. But if you can see here, I've got left eye, right eye, anaglyph, checkerboard, and you have all these viewing modes for viewing stereo. So if I go in anaglyph, immediately we see anaglyph in the viewport. And if I look at the camera itself, I can say, well, the interactional separation is too strong. So I'm going to just make it very small like this. And the zero parallax, I want that to be a bit closer to the camera. So because we're able to see all of this in the viewport, I'm able to make very cognitive changes to this scene or to this stereo setup. And now instead of having a mono camera shot, we have a full stereo shot, and we're able to see it in the viewport. So that's the roast of Charlie Sheen. Again, a project that was done by Royale. And the last project that I want to talk about is called the Mtv Pulse, and it brings some interesting ideas as well. So I'm going to play this. So in this spot there, you can see that we have, as soon as there's something happening in the scene, there's music starting, we have the ground or the environment exploding and cracking into pieces. And that's what I want to do here, is I want to show you how this is being built. So I'm going to bring the one frame here. I'm going to bring it into the perspective view. I'll click OK, and we got one frame for this shot. And my goal is to build a setup that I can use to crack the walls and make the ground explode, and using particle flow to do that. So we're looking at our camera now. We're looking to our camera. The camera is at 0, 0, 0. And I would like to match the camera view from this frame here. So in Max 2014, we have this new tool called the Perspective Match. I'm going to enable this. And I'm going to show the vanishing line. The vanishing line shows you lines for x-axis, y-axis, z-axis. So I can go and grab these lines and place them roughly where they should be. So the y-axis will be there, and I'm going to try to follow the lines there. The x-axis seems to be pretty well defined there. I'm going to define the z-axis here, and the x-axis seems to be defined in the back there as well. If I want to refine this and go a bit closer, again, a new feature in 2014, I can go into a 2D pan zoom mode. So I can zoom in here and go a bit more closer onto my pixel and not break my camera view. And as you can see, I'm going to exaggerate this here, but as I'm moving, you see that the camera is rotating. It's trying to match the perspective as we are changing those lines there. So I'm going to match this very precisely, match this as well. I'm going to make sure that my Y is very well aligned like so onto the lines there. Same thing here. It's not perfectly aligned, so I'm going to align it here and there. And the x-axis seems to be fine. So I'm happy with this. I'm going to exit the isolation mode. And now this camera is oriented exactly in the way that it can give me this perspective view. What I can do now is I can say, well, the vertical alignment there, I would like to bring it down so that it matches the back of the wall there. So I'm just going to match the ground, the joint between the wall and the ground. In my horizontal view there, I would like to match the line as well, so I've got a good reference there. So I can see that the perspective matches perfectly, and I'm able to start working with that. Now that I've got this, I'm going to still work in camera view. I'm going to create a plane one by one, and I'm going to create the ground, and I'm going to go in auto grid mode. So if I'm in my grid view, my camera view here, I can immediately start to create the ground, convert that to an editable poly, and move the edges there so I can fill the whole screen with the ground or the floor here. Same thing with the front here. I'm just going to move it a bit towards the front like that. And this too much against the wall, so I'm going to move it slowly until it's there against the wall. Then I can grab the back edge and extrude that without any width, but I'm just going to extrude this like this way. I can create the walls, and I can bring the front here up to the front, and we have a fully done space here for the room of the restroom. I'm going to make this see-through so that we can see the background still. Make it see-through. And I can continue to model my environment this way. So if I go here and say I want to add a box, I'm going to turn on auto grid. I want to create the grid, the box here, create the cabin there. I can create the urinals as well. And you can go on and start to build your environment from that point of view because the perspective match. So if I do all of this, this is my final object and camera. I'm going to look through that final camera. This is how it has been done. So I've got my cabins, my urinals. I've got the lavatory here in the front. So it's a good reference to start building. So what I want to do now is I've got the objects inside of the scene. I want to start creating my effect. And the effect is I want to do the ground, the wall, and the back wall exploding, cracking and exploding. So if I want to do this, I want to capture the texture. I want to capture the material from the shot that we have here. And I want to create a ground that matches the material. So in order to do that, I'm going to use the projection mapping technique. I'm going to project back the frame back onto the ground here. So to do that, I'm going to create a new material. That material, in this material, I'm going to put a camera map per pixel. The camera map per pixel allows me to pick a camera for projection and a texture that I want to project. So I'm going to use a bitmap. And for that, I'm going to use the same image that I use here, which is the one frame perspective. I'm just going to use that. So it's going to project it back onto that face. I'm going to assign the material there. And now we don't see it in the viewport. The reason is that the projection map or the camera per pixel happens at render time. But the thing is that if I do render an animation sequence, it's going to always reproject that specific frame onto the ground or onto the debris as well that I'm going to create. And I don't want that to happen. I want to capture the frame as it is at frame 1, and then the effect will bring the texture with it, and the debris will continue to bring the texture as it was on the ground. So to do this, I need to render to texture. I'm going to go in here and render and convert that projection into a texture map. And what I want to do here is I just want to grab the diffuse channel that I've created. So let's say diffuse map, add that. I want that 1024 by 1024. I'll put it here in my image folder. So put it here. I'm just going to override that RTT demo file. Yes, that's fine. And say OK. Like I said, 1024 by 1024. I want that to be put into the diffuse color. And I want to create a new material. I'm going to render that and overwrite. That's fine. It's creating a texture map, and that texture map is based on the projection. So now you can see that I've got this projection here on the ground. It looks kind of stretched on this object, but if I look at it from the camera, it's a perfect match it's a pixel accurate match with the background there. So now I can start from this frame to start to build my effect here. To show you the full, all of the object baked, this is how they look like, all baked. So the wall here, the back, and you see that it matches perfectly the projection or the original projection. So now I'm ready to start to cracking this object into pieces. In order to do that, I'm going to create a line, and I'm going to define the area where I want that object to be destroyed or cracked. And I'm going to try to avoid where the characters are, where the cabin is, and I'm just going to draw that line here. And it's going to be used as my cutter. I'm going to define this as my cutter object for the ground here. So yes, I want that to be closed. I'm going to extrude this like so. I'm not going to cap the top at the end. I'm going to create this geometry there. And it's an extruded line. And now I can use that as a cutter to slice the ground and the geometry of the ground. In order to do that, I'm going to go into my compound object, use Pro Cutter. And I want to auto-extract the mesh, explode the mesh by element, keep the inside and the outside of the cut. And then I'm going to pick the ground as the cut. And we now have our object here being separated from the ground. The ground here, the projection, I don't really need it for the rest of the ground, so I can use just a matte material to keep it, to keep the shadows, to receive the shadows, the reflection, and all of that. So what I'll do is I'll just use the regular shadow reflection map material, drop it onto the rest of the ground, and I'm ready to focus on this area here. It's going to be the area that I'm going to break into debris. In order to break this into debris, I'm using a free script on scriptspot.com called Fracture Voronoi. Very handy script. What it allows you to do is to define the number of pieces that you want. I'll say 50 pieces, break, and it's going to use the Voronoi algorithm to break it into pieces. And now I've got fragments that I can bring into my particle flow system. I've done that for the wall and the side wall and the back wall there. And I've got all my debris there, and I'm ready to bring this into particle flow. All of this can be done as a rigid body simulation. I could do it in Mass Effects, but by bringing it in particle flow, you can extend much more the simulation by doing all sorts of tests and expand it a bit more. So that's why I want to do this in particle flow, and that's a new feature from Max 2014 as well. So if I want to do this in particle flow, I want to start with a basic particle system. Right now we have nothing in there, so I'm going to bring in a Mass Effects flow. I'm going to press play. And we're going to see that we have those cubes falling on the ground, which is not exactly what I want, but I've got a real-time physics simulation that I can start to change and tweak to make it look the way that I want. So the birth grid here, I'm going to change it by a birth group. And the birth group allows me to pick any object in my scene and transform it into a particle. So I'm going to grab all of these debris there, select a few of those here, and then say select similar, select all of them, and then I'll say bring in all of the selection. And I can then say hide my original object in the scene. They're no longer visible. Now you see that all those particles are represented as cubes, so I can just delete the cube operator here, and now we're back to our debris, and they're looking great because I didn't assign a material, but that's fine. I'm going to work this way to start with. Right now, if I press play, you'll see that the whole system is going to explode because it's all simulated as boxes. This is what is getting simulated, all of these boxes. So I'm going to change that to a convex all, and right there, we're going to have a much better simulation. All of those debris are falling down. I'm going to delete the spin operator. I don't want to have a default spin. But what I want to do is I want to interact. I want these debris to interact with certain elements in my scene, especially the walls there. So I'm going to grab all of the walls, the cabin, and the ground. And I'm going to apply a special modifier called the Pflow collision shape. And the Pflow collision shape allows me to say, this is a geometry. I want to simulate the geometry, and I want to activate this so that it's visible inside of particle flow. So I'm going to bring in an operator called the MP collision. And the MP collision, I'm going to say add by list. And all of the objects that have this specific modifier will be listed here. And now if I do my simulation, you'll see that they're going to stand a bit more. They're going to kind of be pushed a bit towards the inside. But that's fine. Now they interact with my environment. To do the explosion effect, I've created some collision shapes. And I've got a few spheres there. So I've got a sphere at the bottom here. And I've got a sphere in the back there. And those spheres have been animated kind of to move inside of my scene. I'll apply the modifier, particle flow collision shape. But this one here, I'll say it's an animated surface, activate that. And now that they're all been activated, I'm going to be able to go by list and say I want those spheres to also interact with my objects in my scene. And now that this is done, what I'm going to get is my effect, where they're going to push the debris inside, and we have the explosion effects. So that's kind of the idea of how this was done. You can do this very quickly with all sorts of environment. And you'll see in my final clip there, which is the Royale demo reel, you'll see that they've done a few examples and a few projects or a few ads based on the same idea there. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for Royale for letting us use their material. And here's their demo reel for this summer. So thank you very much.